My name is Jacqueline Barber, and I am a member of this department, and I'm delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Sima Samar, who is an eminent Afghan human rights and women's rights leader. Dr. Samar has done an enormous amount of work, which I'm sure she'll talk about, in Afghanistan, related to a whole range of health rights and women's rights issues, including starting the first formal training for midwives and addressing issues to do with maternal mortality in a systematic way. But she's also really been a fearless and outspoken advocate for girls' rights and generally human rights in the country. She was the first Afghan Minister for Women's Affairs, and then went on to be the Afghan High Commissioner or Commissioner for Human Rights. And she's also served extensively in a range of UN roles, and is, kind of widely respected for the work she's done. She's just in the process of finishing her memoirs, which I've had the privilege of reading 2/3 of, which are absolutely amazing account of her life. So I'm really grateful to you, Sima, for coming across here. She normally spends most of her time at the Kennedy School, and she's part of our Scholars at Risk program. So, one of those many people who have not been able to go back to Afghanistan for reasons of their own safety. So, Sima, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here. We have a room full of colleagues, many of whom work on issues related to global health. Some are particularly interested in women's health, but I'm sure they're really interested to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Jacqueline, it's a pleasure to know you and to be your friend and colleague. And thank you very much for everyone for coming and your interest on the reproductive rights and the impact on the conflict in Afghanistan. Well, I'm a medical doctor by profession, so I was started a hospital for women and children in Pakistan first in the 1987, and then later on in 1989, I started established some hospital inside Afghanistan and also outside Afghanistan for the refugees in Pakistan, because I was also refugee in Pakistan from end of 1984 to 2001, so 17 years being refugee, and worked in a hospital which had a department for women. And also I was going to the refugee camps twice a week. Even when I was young, I was thinking that we have to, it's a basic right to have access to reproductive rights, and particularly for the countries like us, to have access to contraception. Because of the poverty in the country, because of the situation of women in Afghanistan, the patriarchy in the country and male domination in the country, I was thinking that a woman, when I was quite young before going to the medical school, I was thinking if women have a possibility to control the number of their children, they will be more empowered. And I believe on that. So in my personal view, access to reproductive health and contraception is really basic rights. And also it really have an impact on the overall situation in the country, in the societies. And reproductive rights or access to reproductive rights is not only a woman issue. I think it's a social issue. It's a global issue, I would say, because we like it or not, it have impact on everything. Simply on the environment, on everything, you name it. In our country particularly, because we have the growth of the population is much higher than the actual economical growth in the country. So what was happening in the camps or in the refugees, that we had more than 6 million in Pakistan and same amount in Iran, and also in the country. We had, before the war started in 1978, we had family planning in almost in all the provincial hospitals in the country. We had that department that giving information, awareness raising to the women, and also giving some food and ration by WFP on that time maybe for the lactating and pregnant women, which was quite helpful, I think. And it was really somehow functioning, and they started to have the local woman trained and then going house to house, kind of a community health worker, in order to give information and also giving some contraception to the woman, and of course giving information about the contraception to women. And it was all of them disturbed by the war. So during the war, of course, nobody paid attention to the social affairs, social issues such as health and education. That comes after the overall fighting. Then we had as I said, that we had refugees, and we had all Islamization program in using religion as a tool, as a weapon of war in Afghanistan and also in Pakistan and Iran. It was after our so-called coup d'etat or revolution. The people who did it, they call it revolution, but generally the people call it coup d'etat. And then we had the Iranian Islamic Revolution. We see these days what's going on there. And unfortunately, US, UK, and Arab countries, they started to, actually the aim or the objective was to stop communism, to stop USSR advancement in the area. So they used the Islam as a religion, as a tool to fight to stop the advancement of USSR, so-called communism. And I think also the other issue was important because they were carrying the gun and they were fighting against the USSR. It was not women. So women's issues, including reproductive rights, because everybody, when we talk about reproductive rights, it goes to women. I mean, although it's not only women issue, and they were forgotten. Nobody was really supporting any program on reproductive rights. I just give you an example. I started a school for the girls in Pakistan in 1990s, and then I drafted a book, a literacy book for elderly girls who were not 7 or who were 13, 15, and they didn't want to sit with a girl who was 6-year-old or 7-year-old. So I drafted this literacy book in order to give them possibility to learn how to read and write and do this simple mathematical counting. So I wrote, as a profession, I wrote mainly about the health issues, starting from simple issues at home, insect bites, how to stop epistaxis if their children start bleeding, and they should not be really panic. Instead of that, they could take some measures to help. And add the issues of hygiene on the for girls during their menstruation, and what is menstruation, because in those countries, and I don't know, in some countries it's taboo, nobody's talking about it. So, and then I went to pregnancy and danger signs of pregnancy. So I went to UNESCO. UNESCO started their office for Afghanistan. I said, can you please print this 100 copy of this? And this mentor looked at me, and American. He said, leave the book here, and we are not going to support any religious issues. I said, there is no religious, it's all human issues rather than religious issues. He said, leave the book, and then I'll ask my Afghan colleague to look at it, and then we will see it next week. So next week, when I went, he said, I'm so sorry, because we cannot print this book because you're talking about the contraception. And I said, well, it was the 3 last page of the book. I said, don't put your logo. Whatever UNESCO does has to have the UNESCO logo. So we cannot really do something without our logo. Then I said, don't print the last 3 pages. I can do photocopy and give it to the students. He said, no, we cannot do that. I'm telling this story with the way they really approach on reproductive rights and access to contraception in Afghanistan. And of course, it's also the war, because we all know that how destructive is war, and a lot of people lose their life, and they were saying that we need more men and more people who could carry gun and fight against the USSR, because nobody was thinking that USSR would be collapsed so quickly. So the population got really high, and then women had no choice. As I said, that I was working in a hospital, and then I was working in the camp twice a week. So I was taking some contraception in my bag and trying to help women in the camp and convincing them to use this. And all of them were saying that we have to have the permission of the husband. It's not your husband's issue. The perception that they have more children than they get out of poverty because they will have more workforce, which is not the case. We all know that is not the case. But nobody really paid attention. This was the case inside Afghanistan, and this was the case outside Afghanistan. And then what was happened, of course, with the more children, more poverty, and then the Western countries, with support of Saudi and Pakistan, they started this religious school. They took the children because the families were not able to feed them. 10, 12, as much as they could produce. And they were trained and brainwashed in those madrasas. Now they are the one who control the country. And they are the one who fought for 25 years in Afghanistan. So the issue that when you have more children, we know the poverty, then lack of access to education, lack of access to a better life, then what they would do? Increase on production of opium. And the main labor on those opium collection were children, because people keep saying that they have finer fingers, so when they cut, they can easily collect the opium. And also, a lot of children who were not able to go to those madrasas were used as a child labor in carpet production, which is also something that the people keep saying, that the children can do much more. Their finger is smaller, and among the thread, it's easier to work. Although I'm not supportive of child labor, but what? Either they would take to the madrasas or take to the carpet weaving or do any other really hard work, or they would go to the opium production. Imagine when these children were going to opium collection when it's ready. Most of them are directly or indirectly getting addicted, because they are collecting on their own daily utensils that they have, and they use that. Even in those areas that they produce a lot of opiums, then they give the bushes to the cows and the other animals. They were saying that even the cows are getting addicted because of the remaining drug in that bulb, and it is giving to those animals. So, which has a logic on it. So what's happened, we had all these uneducated, unemployed young men, And who's going to use them? All these gang smugglers or the terrorist groups. And that's why they were so much joined to these madrasas and became the foot soldiers of the Taliban. So it had even in the other political parties that had the power in Afghanistan before the Taliban, unfortunately, were also in the same direction, because they were able to employ those unemployed, uneducated people, and using religion as a tool to fight against USSR. So we continue the fighting in the country. It's still the case. What's happened? Increased the poverty within the family. For the girl child in the family, which is not going to be recruited by those groups. Some of them are used in the opium production, but mainly it's the boys, the male child. For the girls, the increase of forced marriages, increase of child marriages because of the poverty within the family, and again, lack of access to education. We all know that the education or access to education in healthcare and the connection between these two, that how much educated people are really taking care of the family and their health. I keep giving example for the young students in Afghanistan. I said the mother who see amebia under the microscope, they believe that there's a small, tiny thing that can make us sick. And she will try to give clean drinking water to their family. But the mother who doesn't know and doesn't believe that something which you cannot see by your eyes can make you sick. It takes time to convince that mother, unless their children is educated to talk to their mother that yes, it's something like that. So child marriage, forced marriages within the for the girl's child, and domestic violence. With the increase of poverty, which is the cause of the conflict, domestic violence really increased because they are all frustrated. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough facilities. In the families who suffer from poverty, for a pen, the children fight. The children start fighting among themselves, then the father comes home and then beat the mothers that it's your children, you cannot control them. He doesn't say that it was also his children. I think it's common everywhere, not only in Afghanistan, but it's more in countries like us. So that the overall cycle continues, because a girl who is married from at the age of 12 or 14, she keeps producing children until she is 50. She doesn't have access to contraception. And this was unfortunately the case after the Taliban was removed. First Taliban government was collapsed or removed from power in the last 20 years. So I was talking to the Minister of Public Health. I was saying that, why don't you take some action? No, it's the conservative people, which I was comparing that when we were young, the hospital had the family planning program. Why not now? Use WFP, use WHO for this, UNFPA, and all those agencies that could help on population control and reduction. The impact on the boys, they become more aggressive because there were no any other possibility. They are observed by those different groups of terrorists or smugglers or gang groups, and they are the whole patriarchy become more powerful and dominated in the country. And continuation of the conflict, of course. Because if they cannot feed their children and there's no job opportunity, where they would go? Any possibility, you don't believe how many Afghans every autumn try to go to Iran or to Pakistan, although both of the countries are not really doing very well on economy for laborers. And they face different kind of violation, different kind of discrimination in those places, but they go because there's no other possibility or job opportunity for them in Afghanistan. So I think that is really paid a lot of facilitate the environment for the continuation of the conflict. And that is the case today, particularly with the withdrawal of the NATO forces in the country. When NATO was in Afghanistan, we had 49 countries forces or soldiers in the country, including some of those small, Luxembourg, for example, they had 9 medical staff in Afghanistan, but they were army kind of people. So the whole economy was based on the money from outside. And then yes, in the last 20 years, we had the possibility for some job opportunity and also for the boys and girls to go to get education, to go to school. But then the employment was really not enough in the country. So one of the things that I was lobbying, and some people who think like me, we were lobbying that we have to focus on family planning and population control. We are talking about the family planning and population control when we had the Mujahideen government in Afghanistan in 1994, which was also supported, unfortunately, by this country and some other countries to fight against the USSR. The Afghan government on that time, it was not Taliban, it was Mujahideen government. They did not allow any Afghan delegation to participate in Cairo conference because they were saying that they discuss on Islamic issues. And similarly, in 1995, when it was Beijing conference, they didn't allow the Afghan delegation to go because first they said they will not send anyone because it's on Islamic issues, topics are discussed there. Then they said they will send a delegation, a female delegation with their male member of the family as a mahram. And then finally they decided not to send anyone. The reason I'm connecting all these things, that the access to reproductive rights has direct impact on development in any country, including Afghanistan. So whatever we did in the last 20 years with the support of the international community, even when we started the school and the children was able to go to school, there were no official ban on girls or boys' education, but then we didn't have enough facilities, or we didn't have enough female teachers. And the conflict continues, unfortunately, with the even during this last 20 years when we had everybody in the country, they did not really pay much attention on population control. We have, I think in Afghanistan, we have 65% of the population below 25. So it is a problem. There's no doubt if it continues to participate on the conflict. So imagine that the people who were in those madrasas and trained and brainwashed, when they came out, they were ready to kill to be killed. So that's why they have suicide attacks everywhere. We never had suicide attacks during the USSR in Afghanistan. The suicide attacks actually started after the invasion in Iraq and so on, and came to Afghanistan. So I think lack of access to reproductive rights, including contraception, increased poverty, bad health for the mothers, of course, they don't increase on mother and child mortality rate, which is also, which was reduced actually to 50%. We were the second highest in the world after Sierra Leone. But we were able to, with the establishment of a lot of clinics and train a lot of midwives to go to different villages, it was reduced to 50%. These days, it's gone up again. And it's a lot of premature babies because of stress, because of lack of good diet for the mothers, and bad economy. Again, mother and child have mortality rate gone up. An increase on inequality and discrimination, the gap between men and women again, because of the situation that we are in, and because of the having Taliban in power in the country. I think we are the only country in the world that officially put ban on education of girls from 7 to 12. It's interesting because they allowed the girls to go to school from 1 to 6, and then they allow the universities.
From 1 to 6th grade.
Yes, 1 to 6th grade. But they do not allow from 7 to 12. In few years, in 1 or 2 years, then we don't have female students to go to university. So they are more clever. So I think not only for Afghanistan, but for all of the countries, it's same in our region, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you name it. All of us, we are in a big problem with our population growth and our economy, particularly with the global warming and environmental situation that we are in. And of course, we all know, I think the people who are sitting in this room, that increase in population really destroy the environment. There's no doubt on that. You have one person in the family, one mouth to eat, one person to be washed, one person to be everything that you need every day. And how much would the negative impact would be on the environment in our region. Again, I insist that access to reproductive health and contraception, again, is a basic rights, but it's not only a woman issue, it's an issue for all human beings and for society, for a country, and then for the whole world. And I stop here, and I hope I was not too boring. Thank you.
Maybe I can start,
Yes.
Sima. Thank you very much for that talk. I think the way you link, economic and social rights to health and education is absolutely critical. And so often we operate in silos where we think of these as separate domains. But I wonder now in this current, you draw this very long and depressing narrative of the situation in Afghanistan since Russian invasion in the 70s to now. So we're talking about decades of occupation, of conflict and displacement. But can you just say what now, I mean, since the withdrawal of NATO, of Americans, what has changed in particular? Is it just a continual decline, or are there some particular changes that have been dramatic? Because my sense was that in the interim, quite a lot of progress had been made, both in terms of gender relative improvements in equality and also in access to education. So I wondered if you could just say, how you see the most recent changes over the last, I don't know how long it is now, is it 2 years? So,
It's a year and few months.
yeah,
2 months.
yeah.
Yes, with all the presence of the NATO forces and the promotion of democratic system in the country, we had a lot of progress. During the first Taliban government, there were no school, of course, for boys and girls, but very limited number of boys were going to school. I was running an NGO, so I had few high school for the girls, which was hidden. We were trying to use the tricks to allow the girls to go to get the education. It was the only high school for the girls in the country. So there were no system. Then we slowly start to build a system with the NATO and all the other international forces in the country, or intervention in the country. But I think what was very unfortunate is that US after in 2002, in 2003, they already started, end of 2002, early 2003, they already started to talk about Saddam Hussein and Iraq and mass of weapon of mass destruction. I had a meeting here in Washington with Condoleezza Rice in April 2002, and I said, can you please build Afghanistan as a democratic country that people really believe on democracy and have a good example of democratic system in our region, and don't go to Iraq. Because going to Iraq is, you just encourage more young Muslim boys who are unemployed, uneducated to join the extremist group. I don't know, some are really young and born after 9/11, but some who remember 9/11. President Bush on that time announced that Afghanistan is a success story. They went to Iraq. So attention from Afghanistan was diverted to Iraq war. And that was, in my view, was one of the mistakes. Even with that, and also lack of cooperation and coordination between the NATO different country forces in Afghanistan, we achieved a lot. We had more than 8 million children going to school. We had better health facilities. We had a system in the country, at least we had a constitution which really recognized the equality between all the people and citizens, including women in the country. It took a lot of our energy to add the word woman in the constitution, because they were trying to say that we don't need to mention women in the constitution. They were, in our language, it's follower, the follower of the country. Atba, it's Arabic, I don't know. But we fought and we got that. There were, we had, for first time, we had elimination of violence against women law. We changed the other laws according to the conventions which was ratified by Afghan government, including CEDAW, which Afghanistan ratified in 2003 without any reservation. But then in 2018, when President Trump started the negotiation with Taliban, it was started during Obama, actually in 2010 and 2011, to negotiate with Taliban, but it was different way. They released 5 of the Taliban leadership, give them to Qatar, and the agreement was such that they cannot travel outside of Qatar. So Qatar can keep them in Qatar. And then they released 1 American soldier or officer. And then they started to talk, not only the US, but the Germans, Norway was trying, French, everybody was trying to talk with Taliban. There was a kind of a competition who reached Taliban first, but not in a coordinated way, not in a good manner, I would say. And then they started that they withdraw from Afghanistan. And it was during Obama administration that they said they withdraw and leave small amount of soldiers in the country. And they started to do that. In 2014, most of the troops withdraw, but they had some troops in Afghanistan, slowly. And then in 2020, when the special representative of the US government, an Afghan American, Zalmay Khalilzad, was put on that position to talk with the Taliban, they continued to talk with the Taliban without too much involvement of the Afghan government. Of course, I'm not putting all the blame on the American. I have to say that our own government had a lot of mistakes. Instead of really manage the whole peace process, they were fighting among themselves, between Khalilzad and Ashraf Ghani. Then after the signing that agreement in February 2020 was I would say it's a very bad document. Because you don't find woman in the document, at least the one which is unclassified, I would say. These days, classified and non-classified. It was 4-page and no word on human rights and no other obligation, but they Taliban promised that they will not allow Afghanistan to be used as a training camp for terrorists or terrorist groups to use Afghanistan soil or geography against the other countries. And the American withdraw their troops gradually until end of May 2021. So we were all hopeful that, and also they pushed so much the president on that time in 2020 to release 5,000 Taliban who were in prison in Afghanistan jails. And then the Taliban would release 1,000 Afghan soldiers, or because they didn't have 1,000, so they start to take hostage the civilians in order to complete 1,000 people. So both sides, they released, but on the Taliban release, the contract was that the Taliban will not join the fighting. Who can control on those mountains? Who can control in this country not to join fighting? But they did join the fighting. So the Taliban actually had 5,000 fresh rested soldiers to fight. And then when the election was done here, President Biden announced that they're doing an assessment of the situation. And then they will completely draw. It was 2,500 soldiers in the country, but it was the air support to the Afghan security forces was so helpful and crucial for continuation. And then suddenly in May, President Biden announced that they are going to withdraw their troops, but it was extended only from May to August. So then you saw, I think the unfortunate part was that it was really not properly planned or not properly done. It was, I would say it was a shame for all of us, not only for Americans, but for everyone who was involved. And then suddenly when Taliban took the power, the government was collapsed, the system. So the education, for a while, all the education was stopped because they didn't know what to do. And the healthcare, the Taliban promised the inclusive government, but there's no inclusive government. So it's only Taliban government, and mainly only men with same style, and only Pashto. It's a very small number of other ethnic group in the country. Then they don't have any policy for governance. But from day one, they started to release decrees and statement against women. So women should not walk, women should not work, women should not get education, women should, everything should cover their face, which is not in Islam. So there was a webinar with the foreign minister of Taliban. I asked him the question, I said, Mecca is the holiest place for the Muslim. When all the Muslims going to Mecca for pilgrimage, and they are all walking together without segregation of men and women, without segregation of different countries or ethnic groups, colors, is Afghanistan is more holy than Mecca? What? From where you're getting this message that women should cover their faces? No, not. He said, we are not against covering the faces. We only ask women to wear mask. And I said, why they should wear mask? Because the hair of women is a problem, the eyes are a problem, the nose and the lip is a problem. What is this? The whole body is problem. So you should complain to God why he made us like that.
Or thank.
Yeah. So almost everything. Economy is collapsed. The security forces that was trained by the international forces in the last 20 years, it was said 350, but maybe it was around 200 something because of the corruption in the government. They all sent to their home, and not only to home, they were in danger. They killed a lot of them. Women are practically, they are trying to erase from the public life, but it's the women in the country who resist, who were first in the street calling for their rights and resisting against Taliban. So you name it. There's nothing. The only country who doesn't have constitution. Every single Talib leader or governor in different province, they do their own way. The sanction on Taliban, somehow they release the sanction because most of the Taliban leadership are in the UN sanction, they cannot travel. But then they kind of reduced to someone, and they were able to travel. The unfortunate part is that they don't know what to do, because in the Security Council between China and US and Russia and US, we are in the middle. We are used as a tour guide. So they, for example, Norwegian Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, he was Foreign Minister of Norway. When he came to Kabul, we had a meeting at Serena Hotel. I had a meeting with him when there was a suicide attack. So he firsthand experienced the Taliban terrorization. But then they sent a private jet to bring some of the Taliban to Norway, to Oslo. I said, we were in that meeting at 6 p.m., the attack was happened. We were there at Serena Hotel at basement until 10 o'clock at night. And they lost a Norwegian journalist actually on that attack. It was 6 foreigners were killed, 6 Afghan were killed. It was really bad. It's like James Bond movie. I personally could not go to that hotel for a year. Even every time I was going, the whole thing was coming up. But then he now is Prime Minister. And there was a private jet by the Norwegian, although they said it was Norwegian civil society, but civil society cannot really send a private jet to bring Taliban to Norway. And they were saying that we want to be engaged. Yes, you should be engaged. But there's a different level of engagement. Be engaged and put pressure on them to accept the human rights. And I think it's not only the human rights of women, the human rights of minorities are violated. The Hazaras particularly, but the Ahmadiyya, or no, we call it differently, Sufis in Afghanistan, the Hindus that we had, Hindus and Sikh, they're all, their rights are violated. They did in the first government because they were forcing everybody to go to pray in the afternoon, pray. So they were poor people, they were saying we are Hindu or we are Sikh. Then they asked them to put a yellow thing on their clothes in order to be recognized. So there's a different kind of violation. They even asked them to put a yellow flag on top of your house to be recognized that you're a Hindu. We had quite a lot, not a big amount, a number, but I think it's reduced to 50 families, or between 50 to 100 families.
Questions, comments?
Can I just give a question? So during the 20 years of the NATO, there obviously were boys and girls educated during that time.
Mhm.
And I realize that an autocratic regime, it's hard, but are they a force for change? Or is it just simply that they can't, because they've been westernized in some ways?
No, they are force for change. But the problem is that there's no rule of law. There's no accountability. They're so brutal that they cannot get out. What they have done, actually, one of the decrees was that if women walk without covering their face, the male member of the family will be punished. So the men in Afghanistan, maybe in other countries, like to control also the female member of the family. So somehow they created talib within the family. The first thing that they did, they closed down the Ministry of Women's Affairs. There was Ministry of Women's Affairs, unfortunately, I started. And the Human Rights Commission, both of them were closed down immediately when they came in power. So all those, yeah, they are, but they don't have much hope. I mean, they are really imposing a lot of other subjects in the schools and the universities. We had, when I was in the university long ago in 75, I started university. I gone to co-education school, by the way, when I was young in Helmand. We didn't have religious subject in the university level. But then during Mujahideen, they started a religious subject in the university also. Now it was 4 credit. Now it's 24 credit. So in the school, they also.
So you said that there's no constitution. Was there one and it was terminated, or?
Yes, we had a constitution. We had a constitution in 2004, which is, I mean, they had some problem, but it was really one of the best constitution on the civil rights.
Was the previous government excluded from the Doha process?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Was the previous government excluded from the accords which the United States made with Taliban?
Yes, yes,
Did you ever meet a special envoy?
yes, unfortunately.
What were his views on the subject?
Well, he was, of course, he was saying that he did the right work, and the last interview that he had, he said the withdrawal of the troops will be conditional. But it was not conditional. Of course, our own president also ran away, but because there were no hope. And then until the last day, the security forces were really fighting against Taliban, and they had a lot of casualties. And Kandahar and Helmand, then slowly the headquarters and the Minister of Defense and Minister of Interior, the intelligence service, they did not support the people, the soldiers, and the different parts of the country where they were fighting. So it was also lack of management by our leadership.
Thank you so much for your thoughts and sharing us your experiences. You mentioned about Norway, and my question is, what are the leverages do foreign donors, like foreign partners, have on expanding, women health rights issues in Afghanistan? Because right now it doesn't seem like there is any way in which you can engage to make progress on this front.
Well, they have a lot of power to do, or a lot of stick to use. One is the recognition of Taliban. So the Taliban government is not recognized at all this time. The first Taliban regime was recognized by Pakistan, Saudi, and Emirat. Even Pakistan we blame Pakistan. They were really supporter of the Taliban, and they were giving the shelter and training and support. They're not recognizing. I don't know if you followed the Shahbaz Sharif statement in General Assembly. He said that we are also concerned because the Pakistani Taliban are currently in Afghanistan. And one thing that I forgot, the Taliban promised that there will be no terrorist groups in Afghanistan, but Zawahiri was found on the guest house of our interior minister. Not found, killed. Because it's, so Bin Laden was killed in Islamabad, this one was killed in Kabul, so I don't know where the new leader will be killed. Yes, and they have also the country is really depend on the foreign aid. And it's a humanitarian disaster, which is really bad because suddenly everything collapsed and people were left without job. A lot of civil servants doesn't have job. Women were sent home. The security forces were sent home. At least around 1 million people who lost their job. 1 million people feeding 8 million people in the country. So directly or indirectly. So you could see the impact on everything. The aid, and then we have our reserve here in this country, $7 billion reserve, and that is blocked, which is good. I think it should not go to the Taliban at all. And they can pressure the countries who are supporting Taliban.
I actually wanted to follow up on the reserve. I heard that half of it, the Biden administration has sent to Geneva now, the $3.5 billion. And recently, like
Not yet.
a few
Yes,
weeks ago or
but
something, it
that's
was
the
announced that
problem,
it would, you think that they shouldn't negotiate? Seeing the rates of poverty right now in Afghanistan, and knowing that there's $3.5 billion here, it feels like at what point do you negotiate, I guess?
No, I think it's, the money should not go to the government. But where should it go? If the central bank, a Talib, a mullah, is sitting as a head of the central bank, and then the deputy, all the high official in the central bank is Talib now, who doesn't know anything. And they're fighting to get the money because they can use it. But there's no guarantee that they will not use it for themselves. The relief program goes through United Nations mainly and the international NGOs, but even it doesn't go to the Taliban, but they are the one who have the power. They divert the the relief program to the families of their own soldiers. Which I can't say that their family of their soldiers should not eat, should not have access. They also have a right to food or a right to relief program. But that's also indirectly helping the Taliban continuation. I think these days there is a division between them. And the first time they had Mullah Omar, who was the leader of Taliban. Haqqani group was not with the Taliban. Now it's a Haqqani in Taliban, the Kandaharis they say. So they don't really go to very well. According to Khalilzad, that the Taliban was not supposed to go to Kabul for 2 weeks until they had an interim, kind of agreed interim government of mix of the Taliban, non-Taliban. When Ghani tried to leave the country, then there was vacuum. So the Haqqanis were close to Kabul, they came first. So the main position in the country is gone to Haqqani group, which is mainly security apparatus. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. It's an honor to hear you speak. I was curious about your work and your view on the acceptability of midwifery in Afghanistan. And I know you spoke about premature birth as being a large burden and maternal mortality back on the rise. I wonder if within the context of women's education, do you view in the current climate that a midwifery apprenticeship or training could somehow be acceptable in a way that it's women being trained by women, only helping women in the workspace? Do you see the role of community workers and midwives as being a potential resource for expanding access to reproductive care?
This is a midwife speaking.
Yeah. Yes, I think the midwives are allowed to work. The only sector that women are allowed to work is the health.
Okay.
So the midwives are allowed to work. I don't know, I'm not sure if they started the midwife training again, but they will not be against that
Right.
because it's at home.
Seems
So
like a good
everything
way to
at
get
home,
into the
yes.
space.
Everything at home is okay. And I need to check this if they are still trying to do that. But because it was really difficult, whatever the clinics or the hospital had, whatever resources they had, they spent the first 2 months, and then we had a lot of problems because already COVID
Mhm.
really increased the poverty and a lot of pressure on the health sector. Then this situation, the collapse of economy in the country was really harsh. So WHO took the responsibility to pay the salary of the health staff, and UNICEF was paid the teachers for a while. I'm not sure what is going on these days, but they really increased the tax on the people. Every day they come with new, so they don't have any plan for drafting constitution or anything. These days they are talking that they are going to establish a commission to draft the constitution, but they had 31 decree limiting women's freedom and movement.
Dr. Samar, thank you. This is really such a tragic situation, and you know, I know that we are all very much, with you and your colleagues in spirit, and really hope that this is time barred. But thank you so much for sharing these experiences with us. We're very grateful to you. Thank you.
For giving me the opportunity, I think it's